And here's the thing. You say, Ron, wait a minute. You're telling me every time I meet somebody, I got to turn their name into a picture? Absolutely not. The first time you meet a Steve and you don't have a picture for the name Steve, you have to turn it into a picture. And then you determine Steve is Stove. Well, guess what? The next meeting you go to, you're going to meet a Steve. You use the exact same picture. You use a Stove.
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 77 of Keeping It Real Estate. In this podcast episode, we are featuring Ron White, a two-time USA memory champion. Ron's going to share his personal journey to becoming a memory champion and how he activates more of his brain when memorizing. You're going to learn some really valuable techniques and strategies for improving your memory and increasing your productivity in various areas of your life. You're also going to come away from this podcast with practical tips and techniques that you can implement immediately to improve your memory retention and help your productivity. So tune in and get ready to unlock the full potential of your brain. So with that said, Ron, we are super excited to have you on the show today.
Well, I appreciate you having me here. I enjoyed meeting you in Mexico in February, and I don't know. The one thing I know for sure about you is you're a nice, kind guy. You know, I had two unexpected cancellations for this, and you just rolled with the punches. You're a laid back, kind guy. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me here.
Most definitely, Ron. So I guess why don't we start off by having you give our listeners a little bit of a background on yourself and how you came to what you are today.
I am a two-time USA memory champion. I used to hold the record for the fastest to memorize a deck of cards in the United States. And, you know, when people hear that, they automatically make this assumption that I have some natural gift that I was born with, that, this guy was born with a superhuman memory. And, then he figured out a way to cash in on it and make money teaching memory seminars on his natural gift. But, that's not what happened at all. When I was 18 years old, I took a memory seminar, and I loved this memory seminar so much that I ended up asking the company if I could go to work for them. And I went to work for them, and they taught me these memory training techniques. And it just opened up my eyes to, wow. I was a guy who had a 0.9 GPA at college. I was not a savant. I was just a normal guy. And I'm still a normal guy. But I learned this memory system that has enabled me to tap into the hidden memory power that we all have. Here's the great thing, and here's how I've made my living for 32 years. If I was the only one who could tap into this memory potential, then I would be doing some show in Vegas, right? But, wowing everybody. But that's not the avenue I chose, because I don't want to wow people about me. I want to wow them about them, because it's possible for all of us. So that's a little bit of my background, and I've been doing it 32 years. I know that sounds impossible because I look like I'm 27, but I am not. I'm getting ready to be 50, and I started when I was 18. So this will be my 32nd year doing this.
That is amazing. And obviously you've taught a lot of people along the way. How many people are actually able to tap into this, and how many people struggle immensely when they go through your training and what you do?
I don't think anybody really ever struggles with it, because it's so simple. It's a simple concept, and I'm not trying to hide anything, so I'll just say what it is. It's a memory technique called, it was originally called the method of loci. It was developed in 477 BC by a man named Simonides. He was a Greek poet, and he realized that if he imagined what he wanted to remember on different locations in his house, loci is the root word for the word location. So the method of loci, the method of location, right? The method of using locations to memorize. So in essence, what Simonides discovered in 477 BC, and as the story goes, I don't know if this story is true or not, but I read it on the internet, so I'm going to assume it has to be true, right? But as the story goes, Simonides was in a room in 477 BC, and the roof, or he was in a room, then he leaves. After he leaves, the roof collapses, kills everybody. He's asked to go in and identify the bodies because he knew where everybody was sitting, and you couldn't recognize them anymore because they were crushed. So they needed somebody to identify the bodies who could remember based on the position in the room. So he went and he said, well, person was sitting there, that person was sitting there. And as the story goes, this was the light bulb moment for Simonides, that you could imagine things in a spot in the room and later remember them. Now, I don't know if that's true, but the interesting thing about this is I heard that story in 1991 as the history of memory training. And so from 1991 to 2020, I was telling that story, not knowing if it was true or not, because it's who was there 2,500 years ago. And during 2020 COVID, you couldn't go do anything. So I bought a bunch of old memory books. And I got some writings of Cicero, not the originals, but copies of them from 2,000 years ago. And I about had a heart attack when I read this story that Cicero wrote 2,000 years ago. So if it is a fake story, it's a 2,000-year-old fake story. But I say all that to say this. Let me button this up by answering your question directly. A 6-year-old child could look around the room and, oh, hey, this is my window. This is my picture of my niece. This is my trophy over here. This is my light right here. A 6-year-old could look at locations. So I've never had anybody struggle with it, really. A 6-year-old could do it.
That is absolutely incredible. And I kind of rewinding back when we were in Mexico and you presented, you memorized, I believe it was 157 individuals in probably a couple of hours time. And so many people, including myself, feel like that's impossible. And, you showed us that it is possible and there's techniques behind it. And you had us go through an exercise, which was absolutely incredible. And, I know you travel the world giving your talk. I think it's called Triple Your Memory, Triple Your Business. How can memory techniques improve business performance? Are you able to share, some items on that and then also some success stories that you've had from some of your students?
Yeah, let me focus on two areas that I think business people can focus on, but specifically what I focused on at the real estate investing conference where I met you. At that conference, we focused on two skills: how to remember names and faces, because in your industry of real estate, you're needing to network all the time. You're needing to remember people's names, and that's going to help you build relationships. So let me give you some tips on that. And then the second thing that I'll show you is how to use this system as real estate, people who are looking to maybe get investors. You're going to have to get up in front of a group of people and give speeches and presentations a lot. If you are reading your PowerPoint or reading your note cards, you're going to lose a lot of credibility. So let me, if I can, focus in on two areas here that I think your audience will be benefited with: names and faces and how to give speeches without notes. So let's go back to the story of Simonides 2,500 years ago. He realized that you needed a location to store something, to remember it. So what he did is he mapped out his house. He mapped out pieces of furniture in his house. Here's a better way. Here's a better way for me to say this. Everybody right now who's listening to this, if you're listening to this as you're driving, just pay attention, but think back to your house. And if you're in your house, I want you to look at the doorway. If you're not in your house, just imagine the doorway. You're standing in the front door. Now, as you're standing in the front door, I want you to look to your immediate left and what is right there. Is there anything there? Well, for me, in the front door, I go to the immediate left, and that's the kitchen. There's it's like immediately there. So I might just turn, and now I'm standing in the kitchen door. So now instead of the hallway, I'm in the kitchen. You may have a different hallway there where you actually have like pictures and stuff like that. That's just not how my hallway's set up. But either your hallway or the first room. I'm going to look at my kitchen now. Imagine you're standing in the doorway of that first room, and I want you to look around to your left, and I want you to imagine what's the first piece of furniture right there. For me, that's a washing machine. The second piece of furniture is I go around the room clockwise. Big piece of furniture, not small. The first big piece of furniture, washing machine. The second piece of furniture is a sink. The third piece of furniture is a microwave. I'm continuing around the room clockwise. You do the same thing. Start in the doorway and continue around the room clockwise. So number one is a washing machine for me, not for you. I'm giving my examples. My next one's a sink. My next one's a microwave. My next one's a refrigerator. And then the fifth one in the room, make a complete circle as if you're going around clockwise and you're starting back at the door now, or you're running back into the door. My number 5 right there is some cabinets. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as I go around the room, starting in the doorway. Do this in that first room in your house, kind of as I'm talking right now. And that's as far as we're going to take it. But after this podcast is over, you can take it further. You could go to the next room, stand in the doorway, and label that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You could go to the next room, stand in the doorway of that room, and then label that room 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, picking 5 pieces of furniture in a room, picking big pieces of furniture, not small pieces of furniture, and spreading them out around the room. These are your locations. This is what Simonides did 2,500 years ago. Now let's say that you have a speech you want to give, and you got 5 points to that speech, and you want to remember. Well, the first point of your speech is, guys, we want to make more money as real estate investors. So you see money. You go to the first piece of furniture, and you create a picture to trigger this. So you imagine money shooting out of that piece of furniture, and it's got to be. It can't be. I got $20 sitting on the washing machine. No, it's got to be crazy. You got to get your emotions involved in memory. Everybody listening to this right now, if they are over 25 years old or 27, 28 years old, they know where they were on September 11th, right? You know where you were. If you're over 27, 28 years old, you know where you were on September 11th, which was 22 years ago, almost 22 years ago. And you can tell me exactly where you were. Why? Because it was such an emotional day. There was so much emotion tied to that. And that is how our memory works. When there is emotion tied to it, it goes into our long-term memory. So don't imagine a $20 bill sitting on your number 1 piece of furniture. Imagine you got $10 million there and it's shooting out like you're in a casino and there's lights flashing. That's the difference. On the next piece of furniture, your next point in this speech is to be a good real estate investor. You need to read a lot of books and listen to Mike's podcast. So see Mike sitting over there on the number 2 piece of furniture, and he's got a microphone and he's holding up real estate investing books. That reminds you to be a good real estate investor. You need to listen to Mike's podcast here, and you need to read books, right? You go to the next piece of furniture, and your next point could be to be a good real estate investor, you need to manage your time effectively. Be a good time manager. So you see a clock over there on number 2, and it's not just a clock. It's a cuckoo bird popping out. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Or excuse me, on number 3. A cuckoo bird, popping out over there. So back on number 1, we got money. On number 2, we got Mike on his podcast. On number 3, we've got a cuckoo bird. Now you go around to number 4. And on the number 4 piece of furniture, to be a good real estate investor, you need to be organized, right? So you see an organizer over there, a planner, a diary or whatever, and you see you're tearing the pages off and you're writing it over there on number 4. And then last one, to be a good real estate investor, you need to work together as a team. So you see your favorite team, which is of course the Texas Rangers, who are off to a great 9-6 start this year with their new manager Bruce Bochy. Everybody is a diehard fan, I know. So you see your favorite team on number 5, and they're winning the World Series, which memory takes a lot of imagination. To see the Texas Rangers winning the World Series is a very good imagination, because it's never happened. So this is just a made-up speech. I just made it up. But let's say you did that. You took the 5 points to your speech and you imagined them around the room. Now you got a group of people you want to present to, and you want to talk to them about how to make money as a real estate investor. You get up in front of the room, no notes in your hand. You just think back to your house. And what did you have on number 1? Money. So you start off, guys, I want to talk to you today about how to make more money in the real estate investing business. The first thing to do that is Mike and Josh have a great podcast. We need to listen to that podcast, get their good information, but we need to read books. We need to constantly educate ourselves. There's some really good legends in the real estate investing scene, and we need to learn from them. And not only that, we need to manage our time effectively, because that's on our number 3 point, right? We need to manage our time effectively. Then you move to your next point. We need to stay organized. And then maybe you got some ideas you want to share on how to stay organized. But finally, guys, you got to build the right team. You can't do it all. You got to build a team. So this is a real quick example of how you could use memory training, the method of loci. The method of loci today in 2023 is very few people call it that anymore. That's more for the older guys like me. It has really become popular to be known as the mind palace or the memory palace. And I say that old guys like me, or I say it's newly called the Memory Palace or Mind Palace, but that would not be a true statement. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in the Sherlock Holmes books, he wrote about this technique and referred to it as the Mind Palace. And those books are 150 years old, but it is today known more as the Mind Palace. But this Mind Palace technique is great for giving a speech or a presentation. I do have some points on how to remember names and faces, but I hate soliloquies, and this is kind of a soliloquy. So I'll pause here before I go to names and faces, and I'll turn it back over to you and ask, do you have any questions on that, or does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. And, you ran that exact exercise and it allowed me to memorize. I think we memorized 10 different things. And you could just rifle right through them. So it certainly works. And I love how you said, get emotions involved. Don't just picture a couple of dollars coming out, picture, money flooding out of that object. And I think you have the same structure for remembering names. And I'd love for you to hear, or for you to share a little bit more about that too.
I do. So if people want to remember a string of numbers, a deck of playing cards, poetry, a real estate investor speech, remember what they read, remember what they learned from a conference, I would recommend this rooms method, the method of loci, a mind palace, using pieces of furniture in a room. That is what you're going to use 90% of the time. There are some exceptions to this, and one of the exceptions is names and faces. Now, on names and faces, it's still all the same concept, though. It's the same concept that whatever you want to remember, you have to store in a location, right? But it doesn't make sense to store it on a piece of furniture. If I meet Mike, or if I meet Josh, or if I meet Lisa or Karen or Tom or Bob or Brian, it would not make any sense for me to imagine them on pieces of furniture in my house unless the entire point of the exercise was not to attach the name to them, but just remember the names of people in order. And in that scenario, a room would make perfect sense. By the way, I joined the military after September 11th, and I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2007. In 2012, I memorized everybody who died in the war in Afghanistan in the order of their death, 2,400 people, and I write it out on a wall to honor them. I'm going to try to do it this Memorial Day. It's getting 6 weeks away. It may not happen. Probably not going to happen. But here's the point. In that scenario, I wanted to remember the names in order. So that's exactly how I did it, 2,400 pieces of furniture. In real life, though, how do you do it? You look at their face. You pick out something on their face that stands out. Do they have big ears? Do they have a gray beard like I do? A white beard? My girlfriend told me today it looks distinguished, as I was being so hard on myself because it's no longer brown. But maybe it's their beard. Maybe it's their ears. Maybe it's their bald head. I've kind of got that too. Maybe it's a scar or pretty blue eyes or bushy eyebrows or something like that. The next time you meet somebody, look at their face and select something that's unique. Their nose, their ears, their mouth, their chin, their cheeks. And this is going to take a little bit of practice. Some people, it's obvious. Whoa, that dude's got huge ears. Some people, it's not obvious. And you're going to have to think and work at this. But let's say you meet somebody with huge ears, and he says his name is Steve. You must turn that name into a picture if you want to remember it. Just as we saw money to remember money, and we saw an organizer to remember organized, and we saw a team to remember work together as a team, you have to do the same thing with names and faces. You meet a guy, he says his name is Steve. Imagine you got a stove, and you're cooking his ears, and his ears are getting all cooked nice and toasty, And here's the thing. You say, Ron, wait a minute. You're telling me every time I meet somebody, I got to turn their name into a picture? Absolutely not. The first time you meet a Steve and you don't have a picture for the name Steve, you have to turn it into a picture. And then you determine Steve is stove. Well, guess what? The next meeting you go to, you're going to meet a Steve. You use the exact same picture. You use a stove. So this takes a while to get good at. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you do, here's when I gave my first speech in 1992 on memory. I was 19 years old. There was 5 people in the room. I only asked 3 of them their name because I did not think I could remember all 5 names. Why didn't I think I could remember all 5 names? Because I was having to create the images on the spot. It was like, there's Brian there. And I was like, okay, Brian, what's the picture for Brian? Brian's a brain. Okay, he's got curly hair, but imagine a brain that's oozing out of his hair. Then every time I looked back at Brian, I would see his hair, and that would be a brain trigger to remember So this is really, the ears are a brain trigger. The hair or whatever it is a brain trigger for you to remember the picture. But I went to the next meeting and there was 20 people there. And I remember, and I turned 10 names into a picture there. Then I went to the next meeting, the next meeting, the next meeting. Fast forward 32 years later, I go to Punta de Mita, Mexico, and I meet you at a conference. There's 157 people in the room, and I get them all because I've got predetermined pictures for names. So this builds. You have to turn people's names into a picture and keep them. Here's some good rules of thumb on this. Use concrete nouns. Lisa, the Mona Lisa. Karen is a carrot. Brian is a brain. Mark is a marker. Concrete nouns. Don't say my cousin's name is Brian, so I'll remember him as my cousin Brian. Well, you see that person in 6 weeks. Is it your cousin Brian, or is it your cousin Steve, or is it your cousin Tom? You got 5 cousins. You can't remember. All you know, it's a cousin. So use concrete nouns instead of people, unless the person's name is Elvis or Madonna or something like that. You know, something crazy. Attach it to them. Now, here's the last thing I'll say on this. Review is crucial. Review is crucial. Did I review here? Do I review everybody that I meet? I don't. Why? Because it's not like I spoke at a conference 2 days ago. If I went back in that room today, could I repeat all 200 names that I memorized? Maybe 50%. But because I'm probably never going to see these people again, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's people you know you're going to see again, you review. Review is crucial to this process. By the way, last thing I'll say on this, that's also one other reason you can remember a car accident from 20 years ago or where you were on September 11th. Not only is there action and emotion, but you repeatedly told the story where you were on September 11th. You repeatedly told the story of the car accident, and that review cements something in your memory. Make these pictures emotional and see it in your memory. A good real estate investor needs to be able to stand up in front of a group and confidently give speeches without using notes to be a more confident speaker, and they need to remember names and faces. If you will practice these 2 skills, names requiring much more practice, it will impact your pocketbook. You will make more money. I'll wrap it up, or I'll turn it back over to you, but I'll say this. Memory equals relationships. Relationships equal business.
That is so true. And I feel like regardless what business you're in, or even if you're not in a business, if you can remember someone's name, it just makes them feel good and it makes that relationship build out further. So love that advice. Pick out a feature on the person, turn the person's name into a picture, a noun, and then, like you said, review. Now, how often do you review and when do you review that person's name? Are you reviewing when you're talking to them, or is it afterwards?
Yeah, so a little bit when you're, I can review as I talk to people because I can multitask a little bit because I've been doing this so long. A guy recently learned this. He's a car salesman, and I was teaching a seminar for their dealership. He said, "Ron, what if I'm talking to somebody and I'm imagining a brain oozing out of their nose, and I can't even listen to them what they're saying anymore because I'm just so involved in seeing this picture on their nose." And I said, well, then stop using the memory system and just listen to your customer. That's the main thing at this moment, to listen to your customer and engage with them and talk with them. But the instant they walk away, you start your review. That night before you go to bed, you ask yourself, who did I meet today? You wake up the next morning, you're driving back to the car dealership to go back to work, you're reviewing who you met the day before. Maybe you create yourself a names journal. And it has everybody you met and their distinctive feature. Steve had big ears, and he was about 45 years old, about 5'10", and he had a brain or a stove cooking his ears. You make yourself a little journal. That's what I used to do in 1991. Is when I first started off. You could take this to the ultimate stalker creepy level if you wanted, and create a PowerPoint or some sort of slideshow. By getting their social media pictures and putting them in here and reviewing that. You meet somebody, go get their Facebook or LinkedIn picture, put it in a slideshow and review it once a week. But the answer to your question is how often do you have to review it? There's no right or wrong answer. You should just keep reviewing until you know you have it.
Got it. Absolutely love it. And, by the way, thank you for your service, for joining the U.S. Navy. I think you served from, was it 2002 to 2010 or so?
That's exactly right. There you go.
That is incredible. An incredible story that goes along with it that you shared with us. But, it sounded like you memorized, was it 2,400 people's names that you wrote on a wall. Is that correct?
That is, yes, that's what I did.
I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal. How long did it take you to do that?
Well, a lot longer than I anticipated. So in 2011 or 10, somewhere around there, this guy asked me, how long would it take you to memorize the Vietnam Wall? And there's 59,000 people on the wall. And I said, well, I can do 150 names at the USA Memory Championship in 15 minutes. So I guess I'm doing 10 names a minute. So I guess, and then I extrapolated it out and I gave him my answer. I said, I bet I can do it in a couple of weeks. He's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I think I can memorize it in a couple of weeks. Oh my God. I am so glad he didn't take me up on that challenge because I was so wrong. The Afghanistan is 2,400 names, right? So what fraction is that? 5%? I don't know. Less. I'm probably embarrassing myself here. So 25,000 would be 10%. So maybe less than 5%. Here's the point. It took me 10 months. 10 months.
Wow.
But here's the reason why. How did I miscalculate? And this was one of my biggest lessons in memory. I was miscalculating because I was discounting the review. You memorize 50 names before you go to the next 50 the next day, you have to review. Well, then you got 50 today, you review, you add on 50. Well, guess what? The next day, you got to review 100 before you add the next 50. Eventually, you're up to name 1,700. I would spend weeks just reviewing before I added the next 50. That is the biggest thing that I, as a memory champion, overlooked as far as memory. And I think it's the biggest thing your listeners are going to overlook as far as memory. You've got to allocate time for a review, even if you're a two-time USA memory champion, which I was at the time.
That makes sense. That's that's phenomenal. I mean, to memorize 2,400 people, even with this information, it almost seems impossible. So that is absolutely incredible that you did that. And Ron, you authored a memory training program. I think it's called the Black Belt Memory Program. Dan and I actually purchased your program recently. We plan on diving in soon. I'd love to hear, some of the key techniques and strategies that people can learn from that program.
Well, in that course, the Black Belt Memory course, people can, I walk them through exactly how to build the mind palace on their own. On this podcast today, I've given you the structure for it, but some people still are like, Ron, I want to build a mind palace with 50 or 100 locations in it so I can really memorize, the books that I want to memorize and the things I want to know. Well, the Black Belt Memory Program will walk you through that the right way, the things to avoid, just like a thing to, there's one thing I've told you right now that you got to allocate, review. So it walks you through all the pitfalls that you may go into and exactly how to build your 100-room or your 100-location mind palace. It goes into much deeper detail on names and faces. You and I just talked about turning names into pictures. Well, in the Black Belt Memory Program, I take 1,600 names and I turn them into pictures. And that's in there. So, but it's more than that. Some people want to memorize languages or poetry. That's in there. Students can improve their grades. So it's a very comprehensive course on memory.
So really your program and, just training your memory is something that everybody can use. I mean, whether you're 8 years old or you're 70 years old, it seems like it can be a technique that can be really advantageous.
It really is. Think about it. If you're 6, I taught a 6-year-old how to memorize the presidents of the United States. How many junior high school, and college kids are stressed out with their homework not because they're dumb, but they're so stressed they can't remember. And then the more they can't remember, the more they get stressed, and it's an endless cycle. That stress can be removed from that student. And as we get older, I'm 50. What's the one thing that I want to look forward to the next 20 or 30 years? I want to look forward to getting older without losing my mind. You know what I'm saying? I want to look forward to getting older with having not just a healthy body, but a healthy brain. So there is no age that having a better memory is not going to be beneficial.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you sharing all those tips. And, before we end this episode today, I would love for you to give our listeners a way for them to reach out and contact you if they're interested in hearing more.
Yeah, if they go to the website blackbeltmemory.com, blackbeltmemory.com, you can enter your email address there, get a free gift, which is kind of a PDF that has some memory secrets, and then on the next page they can get a memory course, my black belt memory course. So I would encourage that for them, and it's thank you for having me on the show, but blackbeltmemory.com.
Blackbeltmemory.com. You heard it, folks. Go to that website, check it out. And with that, Ron, any parting thoughts for our listeners at all?
I would just say that anybody can improve their memory. Your memory's better than you think it is. Stop telling yourself that you have a bad memory. Stop making excuses for something that's very correctable. And just believe in yourself. Trust your memory a little bit more. And I think the let's end the self-doubt and the self-talk about our memory, and let's just work on solutions, because everybody's memory is better than you think it is.
Thanks so much, Ron. I really appreciate you.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you as well.